Well, good morning. The chairs are on the stage, so it means something's different. Today we're pausing our EQ series to do what we've been doing, engaging a series that's going to thread through, I think, the next few years of the life of our church. And we're going to look at one of the hidden stories of our church. The church, so Arise Church, the church in the world, but our church here, our church is a fellowship of people who are being pursued by Jesus. We tend to say the church is the people who are pursuing Jesus, but the church is actually made up of the people who Jesus is pursuing. There's some people that come and sit in these seats that are part of what we're doing that don't know him yet, but he's pursuing them. And those people are living out their faith in Jesus 24/7, 365. So that means most of what this church does and accomplishes is things that you don't ever see, right? Most of your life, people don't see what's happening. So every day you and the people sitting right next to you are making decisions to honor Jesus, to reflect him in their words and actions, and we never see it happen. And I'm in the privileged position that I get to meet with a lot of people from the church, so I hear all of the stories of what God is doing, but you don't always get that chance. So we're going to take time to listen to a story today of how someone has been reflecting the character of Jesus as they walk in the world. So here's a reminder of this series we're doing. The goal of the Everyday Saints series is to help us to go deeper as a community. And here's the kind of 5 areas that we want this to impact us in. We want to showcase stories. So like I'm saying, there are things that people are doing in our church that we don't see. And testimony is powerful. So we're going to listen to testimony today of the work that God has done in someone's life. We want to know people better. So as we grow as a church, there are lots of people sitting in the seats that you know nothing about. And when we bring someone up here and we listen to their story, it gives you a chance to get to know them. And then they come down off of the stage, and then lots of people come and talk to them. And all of a sudden, they feel more known and celebrated and seen in our church. We want to model discipleship to Jesus. So the people that we're inviting up here, something in what they've done this year in their life has reflected the character of Jesus, and it shows what it looks like to follow him. And we want to be reminded of those things. We want to educate us. So some of the topics that we're looking at are educating us on things that we don't know about, we might have heard about. Last one we did, Michael and Natalie did an amazing job of educating us on the challenges of people that deal with infertility and sterility and the challenges of being part of the church because of that. Today we're going to be educated on another area that you may have heard of but not know enough about. And then lastly, we want to become okay with unresolved stories. So sometimes we tell a story and there's a start and an end and it's all happy and celebratory. Sometimes the stories we're walking in, and I would say most often the stories we're walking in, don't have a neat bow on the end of it. And so part of these messages and these interviews is to help us be a little more okay with the unresolved. So that's the goal of the series. So we just sang a song. A newer one that Zach's been introducing us to called Crowns. So if you're like, I need to find that song, go home and Google Crowns and start listening. But we sang the bridge, and the bridge says this: "And when I stand in glory, my crowns before the Lord, let this be my confession. My wealth is in the cross." My wealth is in the cross. I want to take a moment just before I invite my guest up to look at a couple of scriptures and remind ourselves of what wealth truly is when it comes to following Jesus. So let me start here. We serve a God who is marked by self-sacrificing generosity. This is the character of the God that we serve. I sat at an Arise in the Park this summer with my friend who's going to come up in a few minutes. And I listened to her share a story of something she did this year that all I can use to describe it is self-sacrificing generosity. What she did was a clear reflection of the heart of God that's willing to put self at risk in order to bring wholeness to someone else. And so today is really an opportunity to celebrate courage, to celebrate sacrifice, to celebrate generosity. to remind us of hidden needs that exist in our church and in the neighborhood around us, and hopefully to inspire us to be a little bit more like Jesus. A couple of scriptures to guide us prayerfully into Trisha's story this morning. First one is this: generosity has very little to do with wealth. Generosity has little to do with wealth. This is 2 Corinthians 8. And now, brothers and sisters, we want you to know about the grace that God has given to the Macedonian churches. Pay attention to their situation. In the midst of a very severe trial, their overflowing joy. How many of you have overflowing joy when it's trial, right? In the midst of their very severe trial, their overwhelming joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability. Entirely on their own, they urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the Lord's people. You can think of the widow's mite when Jesus is celebrating this widow who puts a penny in the offering box, and he says, this woman has given more than everyone else that we've seen give riches into this box, because she gave out of her lack while they all gave out of their overflow. If we were to define wealth, or if we were to define generosity by wealth, then generosity is only something that can be done by the people who are wealthy, right? Only the financially very well off can be generous if generosity is tied to wealth. But in the way of Jesus, generosity is always self-sacrificing. It's giving away what costs us, is the mark of true generosity. So the prayer, first of all, that I want you to pray with me in your heart is this: God, would you help us to well up in rich generosity in the midst of the trials and the extreme poverty that we find ourselves in. God, help us to well up in rich generosity. The second passage that I want to draw our attention to, I want us to understand that generous spirit is moved to action. We talked about this last week, the difference between empathy and compassion. Empathy is to feel what someone else feels. Compassion is to have empathy plus action. A generous spirit is always moved to action. And so there's a relationship between last week's empathy and this week's generosity, because generosity hears of a situation, feels empathy for the situation, and then gives beyond what we're capable of giving to meet the need of someone else, the generous spirit of God. Another famous verse, 1 John 3:16, says this: this is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions or truth. We're arguing in the EQ series that we want to be a church marked by love. And this is the definition of love, that we would lay down our lives for one another, that we would give generously from what we've been given in response to the needs of the people round about us. And it's not enable people to wallow in their brokenness, but to see a genuine need and to well up with overwhelming love for that person. So here's the second prayer before I invite our friend up to share with us. It's this: God, as we reflect on these two scriptures and we listen to Trisha's story, would you move us to action, that we would be the kind of people who lay down our lives for others. So I want you to do what we did the last time. I want you to give a round of applause to Trisha as she comes up here. And we're going to applaud in advance her courage, both in what she did and then in her willingness to share it. So why don't you come up and join me, Trisha? I forgot about that. Thank you.
You know me so well, Amanda. 12 and a half years now.
That's when you know friendship, right?
Yes.
Oh, exciting. I'm glad you're here. We're going to have a couple of pictures that will pop up at various points in the background just to help you follow this story. I'm visual, so I think sometimes having the faces that go with the names is really helpful. So let me start really quickly. First of all, thanks for agreeing to do this. Now you're regretting talking to me at Rise in the Park, right? Let's start here. Why don't you introduce yourself very briefly, give your name, tell a little about your family, what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Trisha Beard, and I have two little ones, a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. Ooh, and the 2-year-old's a little spicy this morning. And my spouse, Richard, he just left at 4 a.m. for a work trip. And we've been together 10 years, so next month is our 12 years, but 10-year anniversary, married, which is exciting.
Congrats.
Thank you. And he is the wind beneath my wings because he was one of the pieces that I asked God, like, can we find room for this? And he absolutely opened up his heart to me and his time and talent, basically, to allow this to happen. So, yeah.
And then work-wise, you're one of those people loved by some, hated by others, right?
So I'm a nurse. And it's been a rough couple of years for us. Right now I work at Kaiser, and I've been a nurse almost 17 years. So it's been a long journey, but I felt called to medicine very early. I was fascinated by medical things and blood and guts. So, I mean, and in terms of this being a perfect thing for me to do, I feel like it was literally ordained. Like, you already like these things. You're already this perfect vessel for something like this. So, yeah. Just an incredible depth of calling.
That's awesome. We've asked this of everyone. What brought you to Arise?
So I moved into this neighborhood about 8 years ago. This month. 8 years ago this month. And so, I mean, you guys are my community church. And I passed it every day. And I met with the pastor. And at the time, I wasn't really feeling like we were on the same page. With philosophy and just goals. But then I got brought back here again with MOPS when I got pregnant with Chevelle. And Amanda was supposed to come with me that first time, and I ditched her. Sorry, Amanda. Whoops. I was working night shift, and I would have to go to MOPS instead of going to sleep. And then I had to work again the next night, and I was pregnant. And so my husband was like, "You're not doing that." I was like, "Okay."
Well, we're glad you're here, and shout out to Amanda and to all the Momco people in the room. MOPS has been relabeled Momco, just in case you hear that pop up.
Sorry,
so,
yes.
Yeah, you're good. So you embarked on an unexpected journey, I guess, this year. So why don't you tell us what happened?
Yeah.
What the actual label is for what you went and did, and then give us some of the details of that story.
Okay. Well, what happened was a friend of mine who I recently connected with, that I went to school with, who's been a believer and is still a believer despite some significant adversity. We had reconnected, and he had shared a story of his friend who was needing an organ, who was dying. And so then I felt like I got led on this journey. So the person in the middle is Stephanie, and she is the friend of a friend. It was my friend Brian, who I knew from high school. And Brian and Stephanie worked together and co-authored some papers. They're both in the teaching world. They're both professors of university and specialize in medievalism. And he shared her story that she's our age and has had autoimmune liver disease for 13 plus years and is now at the end stage part where she is needing an organ. And that she had not found anybody in her community that had her blood type and that was a match. And I came across the story, and I remember in the middle of the night, I was up a lot in February because Richie doesn't sleep very much. He was up like twice a night for the first 20 months of his life. And it just kept coming back to me, her story, and how I've had so much and been given so much. And so I embarked on a journey to give her part of my liver. She needed a liver transplant. Her liver was not functioning. And this is a picture of us. So how it transpired was I reached out to the team that she had. I found her information, and they actually denied me because I'm an American citizen. She's born and raised in Canada, and I'm American, and I guess her team wasn't quite educated about that piece. And so I was denied and thinking, okay, God, like I feel like you brought me to this person or to this place or to this idea, but now what? And so for 3 weeks, it just kept coming back to me. Just, okay, God, what am I supposed to do with this? Am I supposed to give to someone else? What is it that you want from me? And again, in the middle of the night, I'm up with Richie, and the answer was just call, just message the hospital. And I did, and they messaged me back almost immediately because for them, it's Toronto, Canada, and they're in a different time zone. So I'm getting a call at like 5:45 a.m. My husband's like, who's calling you? I'm like, hey, so let's talk about that. And they said, when can you be here? We want to evaluate you. And I went, and I got to meet her, and this is us after surgery, but and we both just cried the whole time. And I was a match. And there were an awful lot of hurdles, and I just kept saying, okay, God, if this is where you want me to be, you gotta help me get through those, you gotta open doors. Because there were so many things. I mean, I'm a mom of a 2-year-old, and he's 2 now, but back then he was only a year and a half, and so he's little. And I have my job, and that's always in flux, and so how am I gonna work with that? And just so many things, and God absolutely just opened all the doors, and so I said, okay, let's do this, and I was absolutely terrified. I wrote my kids and my husband letters just in case I misunderstood what the goal was here. On June 12th, we had our surgery, and we almost lost Stephanie a couple of times along the way. When your liver is failing you, your liver does a lot of different things. It allows your blood to clot. It filters toxins, and so towards the end, we were talking every day just to see each other's face, just to have that. There was a peace and a calmness when I was in like her presence, even if we weren't physically in the same space. And so grateful that God allowed her to hold on to the surgery date. And this is us after surgery. It was just an incredible experience.
So obviously you didn't give away all of your liver.
No.
Because you need one. So
yes. Thank you, sorry.
No, you're good. What did you give away, and how does that work? And
yeah, so our liver regenerates. God has made an amazing human body, and I feel like I have gotten blessed to study it and have one myself, and it's fascinated by it. The liver, so it regenerates to the size that the body needs. So that's an amazing thing. So when they decided I was a match, they decided that my right lobe was the part that she could have. And so it was 62% of my liver, so it looked kind of like a large cat, which I didn't know that could fit inside my body. And so, yeah, I kept my 38% of my liver, and then it regenerated within 10 weeks. And so I just had my MRI just as a follow-up to verify, and my liver's regrown. Yep. And to speak to the amazingness of the human body, I mean, I'm 40, I'm fairly young, but my liver had normal levels within like 20 days of surgery. So like it was maintaining my body within 20 days after losing 62% of it. And incredible because they took out her diseased liver from her autoimmune disease and then plumbed in mine, which is a little bit like Frankenstein, but it works. It works. And my 62% grew to the size her body needed within those 10 weeks. And so just an incredible journey to be on, just in awe. And I was asking the surgeon about it, and how I know that it changes size is because they said that when they give to babies, they give the left lobe because it's little, right, my 38%. And they would often put a liver into a baby and it would just barely fit. It would be bigger than the baby needed. And when they would go back to do the imaging, it would be smaller. So it would be the right size. So, I mean, the liver is just, it's a starfish organ. Just incredible that God created this. And so cool that I got to be a part of it. And thank you so much for your prayers. There were so many things along the way. The sign says anticipate miracles. And I mean, this is kind of where Stephanie was at, just that, she's dying and she's 40 and she kind of had put off life, hasn't had a person, hasn't had kids. And so this is her new lease on life, which I just feel so honored to be a part of. I feel like I got to be a vessel.
Yeah, you were. So let me ask this. So first of all, let me say this. So this happened in June while we were in between our Arise in the Parks. We're all like just going through life as normal. And Trisha is like giving up part of her body, going through a crazy surgery for a stranger. And as I say, life went on as normal for us. If you get the prayer emails, you were probably praying for Trisha through that.
Thank you.
But for most of us, we had no idea this was happening, and I think that's amazing. So let me ask you this. As a 40-year-old woman in full health with a great career and 2 young kids, why on earth would you put yourself under the knife unnecessarily and risk your life for someone you didn't know?
Because I felt like God called me to it, and so I felt like he would call me through it.
Wow.
And I feel like my whole path led me to here, and then it's still ongoing, but it led me to here. And I had survived a C-section, no problem, so I had known that I have some surgical history, that I did okay, even though I didn't really want to have the C-section. Chevelle was breech, and it was frustrating, but that was the only way they were going to let her out. So, okay, this is what we're doing. Yes. And so I was a good candidate for that. And so I already knew that because I'd gone through some surgery, that my body was okay. And again, I just had to trust that God called me to here and that he's going to, make a way for this to be okay.
Yep, and you used that word, God called me to this. So there's lots of people sitting in the room that might be going, no, I don't feel called to anything, or I hear people say that phrase. So what did being called look like to you?
Well, it was kind of an ongoing sort of, I don't know if nagging is the right word, but just this quiet remembering. And my brain's a little scattered, as you're experiencing. And so I forget things a fair amount. And so the fact that my brain kept coming back to this one, I felt like that had to be divine. It had to be a God thing. And then again, because I said, okay, if this is where you want me to be, I need you to open doors. And then every door is wide open. I'm like, okay, that's incredible. And I still just feel in awe of being part of the whole thing and in awe of being able to watch God's hand move. I mean, we know it does constantly, but to be able to sit there quietly and to see it moving is really exciting. And I don't experience that every day in my own life. I felt like this was an extraordinary thing. And I feel so honored to be part of that process and journey. And I don't even know all the things that God's doing with it, but I'm so excited to have been part of it.
I love how much you sparkle when you talk about it. It's clear that you're not saying that. You're not just making it up. You genuinely are filled with joy. I go back to 2 Corinthians 8, right? In the extreme trial, their overwhelming joy. It's just a beautiful thing.
It's funny that you brought up that verse.
Go for it.
That's from the Macedonians.
Yeah.
Stephanie is half Macedonian. She's half Sicilian, half Macedonian.
Go Jesus! I didn't pick that on purpose. That's cool.
Her mom
cool.
was
Go
born
Jesus.
there, and so that's something else I didn't expect to have. Is that I feel like I have this whole new family, and her mom was born in Macedonia and still struggles with English and writing and reading in English because, this has just been a huge challenge for her. And anyways, just incredible. I mean, her and I were talking last week, and she was saying how her mom said that God brought me to the family, and I absolutely feel like God brought me to the family. Not that I'm exciting, but just that I got to be the one brought, and it's just incredible.
It's cool. So you hear her story, you feel a prompting inside, surgery happened, and now we're here, and it all went smoothly with joy and peace the whole way through, rainbows and unicorns. Or was there an emotional journey attached to this?
Oh, of course. I mean, I was absolutely terrified the couple of weeks leading up to surgery, and just tried to lean into God. And it's it's like when you're uncomfortable, right? That's like when we're fasting and we're not eating and we're hungry. It's like that, where you just say, okay, this is not pleasant, but we're going to get through this together. Yeah, it was not all sunshine and rainbows. I mean, it's surgery. There were a few challenges. At some point, I got off the morphine about 36 hours in because I don't particularly care for narcotics for myself. They just are yucky, and I'd rather deal with pain. But that also, I got one dose of Tylenol, and then the Tylenol went away. And I assumed that it was because my lab levels were not good enough for me to have Tylenol, but in fact, it was actually just an error. So I went about 24 hours with one half dose of Tylenol, and within 2 days of surgery, and so that was pretty intense. Poor Stephanie, she was very stressed out. I just kept telling her, it's okay, this is the work of the gift. This is the work of the gift. Like, it's okay if it has to be hard right now, because how much you give, like what you have to give and how much it is matters, so.
Yeah. That song we just sang again, the song Crowns, in the chorus has this verse, or this part, the greatest of my crowns mean nothing to me now, for I counted up the cost, and all my wealth is in the cross. Part of what you shared with me, there were some letters you wrote pre-surgery. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the letters, again, I did feel like God was going to call me through it, but on the chance that, human error, fallen world, I wanted to write to my kids and tell them, what every parent wants to tell a child, that they're loved, they're wanted, that, you've loved every moment of their life, and that you've been so blessed to be their parent, but then also just that, God is calling you and God is calling me at the moment, and sorry.
No, you're good.
The letters are a little more intense part of it.
Yeah.
Because that's a scary thing.
And I didn't say this to you when we talked the other day, but there is a historical tradition in global mission. So you don't have to go back too far where we don't have the internet, we don't have telecommunications the way we do, and someone would feel called we're going from the US to Africa, and they would get on a boat, and they'd take months to get to their location, and then it would take months to write a letter and get it back home, and months for the letter to go back. So when people felt called to the mission field, they wrote what was called their last letter. And they would write, hey, family, I'm going to the field to give my life to Jesus. I will likely die here. And here's my love for you, my last words to you. And it would be given to the family. When you were sharing that, like, the beauty of that was the global mission piece 100 years ago and less. But that's really what you did. Like, this is mission. It's not just a little blip somewhere. This is living out the mission of God, and rather than go to the ends of the earth and never see your family again, this was the risk. And we were blessed to live in the Western world, and we have great medicine. And we can have lots of confidence in the medical system we're part of, but it doesn't remove the fear that it could go wrong, the scariness of what if something doesn't go the way I want to, and just your willingness to count the cost is a beautiful testimony.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not immune to medical error. Like, I'm very well aware of it working in the field. And even after my surgery, I watched something very catastrophic happen in my community around surgery with a pretty rough result. So yeah, it's a real thing. The picture that's up here is, I feel like it's a testament to you guys, whether you knew you were praying for me or not. Thank you, because my number one goal was 10 days after surgery to be with my daughter as she was the flower girl for my cousin's wedding that had been set 9 months before. And I didn't get to choose the surgery date, so June 12th is the first day they had available, and I wasn't going to say, hey, Stephanie, I know you were not doing so good, but you could wait another month, right? It's not really convenient for my calendar. So I was like, all right, God, please, please, please let this happen. And not that, being there for her as a flower girl is that important, but in terms of things she'd been looking forward to and things we'd been working toward for the year, it was something that was on her mark of, a milestone. So
That's beautiful. You've mentioned elements of this through what you've shared already, but just to ask directly, like, what are some of the ways that you saw and experienced God show up through the process?
I mean, constantly, and I still feel like we're still experiencing that, and I'm still in awe of it. I feel like when I got denied, and then when suddenly this new idea of, yes, we just need to call the hospital right there. Also, when I got denied, I had actually reached out to University of Washington because we don't do living donor here in Oregon at OHSU. It's only deceased donor. So University of Washington is the closest place that does living donor. You need to have a certain size team, and then you need to have the need for it. And apparently in Oregon, we don't have either. So maybe we will grow it. I asked last week, actually. They said they need 3 more surgeons. Okay. But when I was speaking with them on the phone, I had forgotten to take Stephanie's name off the paperwork, and they abruptly hung up on me. They said, oh, you found your person. Cool, click. And I was about ready to give to them. I was like, okay, God, I don't know where you're taking me, but take me wherever you want to take me. And so it flipped me right back to Stephanie again. And then when I was going, there's this amazing company that pays for your flight out to get assessed, because you have to go to be assessed to make sure that you're a candidate. And the day before, they changed the dates I was able to be there, and suddenly my person wasn't able to come, and then the next person couldn't come. And I had 3 people lined up, none of them could come. I'm literally like, I have to leave on a plane, and I don't have a person, and not that I need a person, but I've never been to Canada before. I don't know what I'm doing. This is kind of scary. And at the very last second, my neighbor across the street said, I'll go with you. And we'd had a relationship ongoing, but I didn't know how much of a believer she was. And so she was a huge blessing to have somebody just speaking Bible verses into the space and praying with me through the process and talking to me about God and being a vessel, and just an incredible blessing. And I mean, my cousin would have been great, but my cousin's a believer, but it's a little quieter. It's not quite that same level of interaction.
And there's a picture of Donna. She was in one of the first pictures.
That's Meg.
That's Meg. Go back to the very first one. Yeah.
There's Donna.
Yeah, and I want to put this up here because we're celebrating everyday saints. Donna is a neighbor that
across the street.
didn't have a deep relationship with you.
Not terribly, a little bit. Her husband had passed a few months before, and so I had helped them through that. But nothing like this. Nothing like I'm going to travel with you across the country for days and weeks at a time.
So I just think we should be celebrating Donna as well, right? Because that's part of this story and part of what it looks like to be an everyday saint.
And she got me through some stuff that was hard, for sure. So yeah, Donna's an incredible piece. So that was absolutely a God piece.
And then share about your darkest day post-surgery.
Yes, well, and that darkest day, it started Friday afternoon when I got off the morphine at 11 a.m., and then I had the 1 dose of Tylenol. And then actually what they had fed me for dinner, I couldn't eat, and so I hadn't eaten either, and that was not surprising. The food is nutrition on a budget, and that's okay. There's just certain things my body was very adverse to right away, and so I was just trying to listen to that. And I remember one of the blessings was that Donna came to visit me in the evening, and I said, I'm hungry, and there was nothing. And she went downstairs and scavenged every vending machine till she could find something that I could eat, which is just incredible.
So
she brought back some sort of kashi bar or something. So that was a huge blessing. But Stephanie has a friend named Meg, and Meg is in one of the next few pictures. And
That's Meg.
Meg is also a huge blessing. This is her fiance, Fitz, and they're getting married this year. And he's incredible too. And she had given part of her liver to a little girl who was dying. And then she gave part of her kidney to a cousin who was dying. So she had a lot of people. And her mom had the same disease Stephanie had. And so she felt called to give back. And I didn't really know her before my surgery. And so I'm, waking up from surgery confused. And here's Meg right by my side, just speaking God into this space and just being a huge blessing. And my darkest day was I was coming off of that 24 hours of not having enough pain meds. And the doctor, when I was unmedicated, was like, well, your pain's not controlled, so you can't leave the hospital. Duh. Of course it's not controlled. I haven't had any Tylenol. I didn't have anything. And Meg took me outside and got me a smoothie, so I had something nutritious to eat because I was struggling with the food still. And I had no idea how much I needed sunshine and fresh air and just God's love in that moment. Because I jokingly called my room a tomb. I was up on the 7th floor in the back corner room, and I was grateful to have a room by myself because I signed paperwork saying that I was willing to be with 3 other people in a room. So that was a huge blessing. Oh. But the air was, as 7th floor goes, stale, and just the fresh air and being outside, and having somebody who is just bringing God's light into the space, just such an incredible blessing. So again, I feel like you guys had a huge part in that because I feel like, how did I get so lucky? Thank you for your prayers.
Oh, it's a joy. Thank you. What are some of the things that you've learned through the process? Any lessons that you've chewed on that you'd like to pass on?
I feel like I don't even know all of them yet. I feel like I understand the idea of being a vessel more than I did, just going through it. Just kind of open yourself to God and say, okay, what do you want for me? What do you have for me? I feel like I have a huge appreciation and love for so many people that were a part of this process, but that's not really a global thing. Can you ask the question again?
I was just saying, what are some of the lessons that you've learned? Or maybe some of the other ways it's impacting you. I know there's some career things you're wrestling with.
Yeah. Stephanie's autoimmune liver disease, it has to do with what I didn't know when I learned about her story was that it has to do with the microbiome of the gut and that the liver is part of the liver-gut axis. And it was something I've already felt called to study, and so I thought it was fascinating that this get put in my place as well. And so I'm, that's been something on my heart and mind of like, okay, God, what do you want to do with this? Because now I intimately know this whole process that I didn't know before, and yeah, I'm not explaining myself very well, I'm sorry.
No, you're doing great. You're doing great. Maybe let's turn it a little bit from there. How would you like to encourage the people here and anyone that listens online out of your journey and your story and what God's doing right now? What encouragements do you have for us?
I feel like God shows up in unexpected ways and calls us in unexpected ways. And yeah, as a mom of 2 little kids and working, I would not have thought that this was the direction that I would not have pictured this. This wasn't on my 2024 bingo list, right? That wasn't. So yeah, I guess just keeping heart open and ears open, and I don't know. Now I'm curious what else he's going to call me to, and something that occurred to me as I was going through this is just the ongoing thought of giving back and then teaching that to the next generations, right? So bringing my kids on a medical mission trip and showing them the world and what people deal with. We have first world problems here, and I don't know. We're really, really blessed.
Yeah, that's great.
I feel like that's I've just been shown ongoing how much I have and how much I have to be grateful for, and that a lot of the things I stress about aren't that important.
Yeah, it's true for all of us. I think it's, we talked in the summer at Rise in the Park, and I was like, oh, can we interview you one Sunday? And so we tried to look at some dates that might work, and it's all kind of lined up. we weren't talking at the park about the next generation heart that you had for this. And I was really struck in my office the other day, and then again as you're saying it now. Who would think, like we're saying as a church for 2025, we want to invest in the next generation. Who would think that an organ donation journey would be one of the ways that God would move someone's heart to desire to pass something on to the next generation? Now that's crazy. And yet that's it.
Yeah, I feel like I don't even know all the ways that God's moving with this. I feel like we're, just in the infancy of the journey, even though the organ has been donated. Stephanie's sister couldn't get pregnant as a result of probably the stress of dealing with a dying sibling. And so that's still kind of in the works, and we're hopeful that, there might be a whole new generation of people that are here that maybe couldn't have been if life had gone the other way. And so that's kind of, I don't even know what God's going to do with that.
Yeah.
And Stephanie herself, she likes to joke that maybe she'll be 45 and pregnant with twins.
If that's what she wants, we'll join her in prayer. Thank you. So thank you, first of all, for doing this. And it's every person in the room has the ability, when God is asking us to do something, we have the ability to say yes and we have the ability to say no. So thank you for chasing Jesus. And then at the point where he asked this of you, that you were willing to say yes. So that's what we want to celebrate, is your yes. And then thank you for your courage, because this happened in secret in the background. There's a reason this wasn't a big public story and we didn't know about it, because of humility. And so it takes a lot of courage when you've walked a humble, secret, hidden journey to be willing to let me use it. So thank you for the courage to come up here and share it.
Thank you.
And then would you do this for the room? Would you pray for us? That what just this in you discovered, and you've explained in multiple contexts, like, I've been given so much, I want to use what I have to give to others. Would you be willing to pray that over us, that we would walk in a generous yes?
God, thank you for bringing us all to this moment. God, thank you for using us as your vessels. And thank you for creating us each the way you have, with our strengths and talents. And God, I just pray that you would continue to speak in a way that we can hear you when it is that you're calling something for us to do. And God, I feel lucky that I heard you in my tiredness in the middle of the night. God, I just pray for this congregation. I pray that your voice would be loud and persistent, and that when you call us to something, that you would give us the strength to walk through it hand in hand with you. God, you've given us so much. Thank you for calling us. Thank you for giving us Jesus. God, Lord, I pray that you would bless everyone in this room. Please bless people whose hearts were full of prayer, spending time with you, walking with you. God, I pray for Stephanie. You've walked her through so much. I pray that she could continue to hear and see you and these extraordinary things that have happened to us. God, I just pray for our next generation, that you would guide us on how to show them to hear your voice. God, I thank you for bringing me here today and for bringing me through this. Amen.
Why don't you grab someone next to you and just share one thing that impacted you from what you just heard, and then we'll wrap up with some singing.